pay raises have gone up, flexibility's gone up, but unhappiness and discontentment is an all-time high. And I think it speaks to what you're talking about again, where it's we paint these pictures. Like I used to, when I started in recruitment, it was always like recruiting's a sales job, right? Like you got to sell people into the role, but it's not really, shouldn't be a sales job like that. What you should be doing is figuring out the motivations, to like what the candidate actually cares about, lined up with the company. Can the company realistically offer that? But then also, like you said, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the hard work that people are going to do? And if you can find people who see that hard work as like, yeah, actually, this is a challenge I want to take on, I think it's actually harder to recruit that way. It might take longer. It might take a little bit more thought with like the marketing, but the result is the opposite of what we're seeing right now, which is how many times have you heard of people getting hired onto a company? They're the best candidate. They got the best resume. They interviewed the best. Everything seemed amazing. They were the rock star, the unicorn, they were whatever you want to call it. And then 6 months later, like, yeah, it just wasn't fit after all.
We're entering the back half of this podcast, and I guess it's time to finally talk to an actual recruiter. If we're going to talk about recruiting challenges and recruiting problems we're trying to solve, getting the perspective of a recruiter is probably really useful. And I picked a really interesting recruiter. Now, I know a lot of recruiters, and some of them are pretty darn famous. But as far as I can tell, there's no recruiter who is as famous as Joel Lalgee. How famous? Well, he only has 220,000 followers on TikTok. He's become so popular on TikTok, he spawned dozens of copycat accounts where they steal his photo and make it their avatar to try and trick people into following them. Who does that? I mean, honestly, 220,000 people wanting to listen to what a recruiter has to say? I guess he must have something to say. And that's why I wanted to talk to him on this show. Not only is he extremely popular, it's the way he's become popular that's really interesting. He's been willing to experiment, to try new things, to go beyond what the expectation was, to talk the Realest Recruiter to everybody, to talk and pull back the curtain on what this hiring and recruiting process is really like. I've known Joel for a year or two now. He's a fantastic person. I love the work he's doing and what he's trying to bring to the field. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Joel Lalgee.
Just let it roll.
No edits. No edits needed.
That'll be the teaser at the top of the podcast. It's just no edits. We'll do it live. We'll do it live.
No censors. That's why I do a live show, actually, because then I don't have to worry about any of that.
It's such a different thing doing a live show. When I do the LinkedIn lives for breakdowns and stuff, it's just like, okay, I cannot mess up. It is on a tight wire. There is no net. There is no way to mess. You cannot step away from it. It is crazy.
I love it, man. That's such a almost like marketing perfectionist type of view, where I'm just more freestyle, get out there, connect with the people. It's the Realest Recruiter, okay?
Well, you know what? That's a great lead in. I want to get to that, but who the heck are you? So, Joel, I know that you have more followers than anybody I've ever met in the recruiting space, I think. And if
Lou
anybody
Adler's got like 1.3 million, so.
Yeah, well, that jerk. With love, Lou. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people would go, I know that dude, but I don't know his name or where he's all about. Like, you have so many TikTok fans. It's like, he's funny on TikTok, but what's the story? So yeah. Joel, do me a favor and do everybody a favor and introduce yourself for real.
Yeah, my name is Joel Lalgee. I have been in the recruitment space for coming up to a decade. I started on the agency side of the business, and I've kind of gone in and out of agency work, coaching. The only thing I've really never done is work internally. So I've always been on the dark side of recruiting, but I love the agency side because it's fairly simple, right? We help companies fill hard positions. That's it. I'm not really like a process guy. I'm not, I honestly don't think I have the patience for internal recruitment. But what I love to do is poke fun of, where some of the problems are in hiring. So that's what my social media presence has become. It's looking at what are the processes, what are the things that, we're failing at, what are some of the common annoyances that all of us as recruiters face. And so I've really taken on and kind of created a ton of content around that and really created a brand around let's talk about really what goes on in hiring, really what recruiters are doing, and be a voice for recruiters, because I know there's a lot of job seekers that are frustrated with recruiters.
Yeah.
I want to be the voice of like, hey, yes, there are some bad recruiters. I haven't met too many of them, but here's what we're up against, and here are the things that we face. And trying to educate, candidates, try and educate even hiring managers on, hey, look, this is why when you drop the ball, it actually matters, and this is why recruiting is a hard thing. Recruiting top talent is hard. So I've kind of bounced around agency, coaching. Now what I'm doing a little bit of both. So I run a small agency, taking on 1 or 2 clients at a time. It's retained search, so I'm working really, really closely with clients. I've got a couple of other offerings as well where I can get customizable, but just trying to keep it small boutique agency. And then I do coaching and influencer marketing, for lack of a better word, with like HR tech, TA tech, and yeah, just kind of have become, I guess, a big voice in the recruitment space, which I'm happy about. But hopefully too, like more of a fresh voice as well. And not to say that those voices aren't fresh, but just different kind of perspective, and just trying to hit it at a different angle than I think many have approached what we do. So.
Yeah. I mean, look, the whole pitch of this podcast is that I'm tired of doing it the same way, that there's got to be a better way. It doesn't serve recruiters. It doesn't serve hiring managers, and it certainly doesn't serve candidates. And so I hear the same conversations over and over again. And it's kind of like, how do we break out? And that's really what this is all about, which is, why I'm thrilled you're here. I guess the best way to kind of really get into it is really ask the tough question. And that is, what does it mean to be the realest recruiter? And I say that because to my eyes, your light is flashing. It's strobing a little bit. I don't know if it's just how the camera works, but you are the realest recruiter. That's who you are in TikTok. What does it mean to be the realest recruiter?
Yeah, it's funny because my original, I mean, if you go to Twitter, my what do they call it? The handle is human headhunter, which sounds super cannibalistic, but really the element of both of them was I just want to be like a real voice, try and tell the truth I think in an industry that has a lot of confusion around it. So for example, most candidates I talk to, I mean, I get hundreds of candidates reaching out saying, hey, can you help me find a job? I'm like, no, it's not what recruiters do. Recruiters are not there to help you find a job. They're there to help companies find people. And sometimes those things intersect. And so it can feel like the recruiter's helping you find a job, but really what they're helping you do is find their jobs they're working on. But what I've seen is, I have heard recruiters saying things like, especially agency recruiters saying things like, well, we offer a free service for candidates where you don't have to pay to work with a recruiter. It's a free service. And in my head, I'm thinking it's also the worst service ever, which is why people are frustrated. So and where I'm going with this is there's been a marketing issue with what recruiters do if candidates think that recruiters are there to help them find a job. So when I started saying like human headhunter, the realest recruiter, it's around authenticity and then being empathetic to people, but then also just being like real with like the hard truths, right? So if you go on my TikTok lives, I am not promising people that if they change their headline on LinkedIn, they're going to get a job. No, I'm saying that it's job search is hard. It's really tough. If you want to transition, it's really tough. Okay. Demonstrating your skills is not like this magic trick that's going to get you a new job. And the problem is there's a lot of voices out there around job search, career, and hiring. And so I just took it upon myself. And like, I will always say, not everything I say is, 100% fact, because there is no 100% fact. But what I share is what are the best practices? What are the things that I've seen from lots and lots of conversations with hiring leaders, with hiring managers, and just being on a lot of recruitment searches. But always with the caveat of like, don't just take my word for it. See what works for you and start to do it. And so that's really the feel of the realest recruiter. Second side of it is like, I'm just not a big corporate guy. Like, and I think one of the injustices that we've done, and you talk about this a lot with employer branding, is there's a way to document in a real way where you're actually accurately portraying what's going on. You're talking about the challenges. You're talking about what are the problems you're solving. You're talking about maybe even issues within your company in a way where you're being honest and real about it. And I think there's this weird thing that happens in corporate America where I've been in cultures like this where everyone's rah and everyone's really hyped up, but behind the scenes everybody's really annoyed and everybody's talking behind everyone's back. And I'm one of those people who I will just like, if I see something, I will say it. And it hasn't done me well in my career, obviously. Now I'm like a solopreneur type person. But I realized it's like, I'm not one of those people who's just going to play like the corporate polished game. So again, with the Realest Recruiter, my whole thing is like, I just want to be real with people, whether it's with clients, candidates, just people, just try and be as transparent as I can. And I think, hopefully leading like a movement of other recruiters where they pick up on the same things and they have hard conversations with people.
Yeah, you're having that, emperor has no clothes kind of moment to say, this isn't how this is supposed to work. This isn't helping. This isn't useful. The rah, the cheerleading of branding, the cheerleading of, hey, this is the best place to work, as if that's a possible thing. It doesn't serve. It's a fig leaf that covers all sorts of other host of problems. And what I think candidates at this point are smart enough to know, look, it's not all puppy dogs and daisies and tickle fights. It is work. And there's a reason they pay me for it. And that's because it's hard work and it's going to be tough. So let's describe what's tough. Let's describe the challenges. Let's describe what the frictions and frustrations are going to be so that you can make a really informed choice. Do I want this? Am I okay with this? Am I willing to trade this amount of time, this amount of money for these kinds of challenges? If so, let's talk. If not, it was lovely meeting you. And I think you're doing that by kind of pulling back the curtain on how recruiters work, how recruiters should think about companies. I think that's coming through.
No, it's great. And look, one of the things that I read yesterday was pay raises have gone up, flexibility's gone up, but unhappiness and discontentment is an all-time high. And I think it speaks to what you're talking about again, where it's we paint these like I used to, when I started in recruitment, it was always like recruiting's a sales job, right? Like you got to sell people into the role. But it's not really, shouldn't be a sales job like that. What you should be doing is figuring out the motivations, to like what the candidate actually cares about lined up with the company, and can the company realistically offer that? But then also like you said, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the hard work that people are going to do? And if you can find people who see that hard work as like, yeah, actually, this is a challenge I want to take on, I think it's actually harder to recruit that way. It might take longer. It might take a little bit more thought with like the marketing, but the result is the opposite of what we're seeing right now, which is how many times have you heard of people getting hired onto a company? They're the best candidate. They got the best resume. They interviewed the best. Everything seemed amazing. They were the rock star, the unicorn, they were whatever you want to call it. And then 6 months later, like, yeah, it just wasn't a fit after all. And it's because we're doing it wrong. Like we're so focused on who can we bring into the funnel that we're not thinking about like, are even the right people in that funnel, right? You got 1,000 of the wrong people applying to your job. It's a waste of time. And this is something which like in my mind, I've actually shifted over time because I used to think it's all about reactions, all about impressions, all about those things. And I think that can be helpful for awareness. But what's much more helpful is like, are they the right impressions? Are they the right people? Are you reaching the right people?
Yeah.
And as recruiters, I don't know in the conversation, I think we've always been trained on, well, you got to really sell them on the company, sell them on the thing. And the problem is if you sell somebody on something that isn't real, you don't help yourself because then retention's down, quality of hire is down. So again, it's all in line, right? It's that real authenticity, transparency. How can we bring that forward in the process?
Quick question. If you could increase the offer acceptance rate by 20%, what would that be worth? Or maybe get 10% more prospects responding to your recruiters, what would that be worth? Or lowering your ad spend and your agency spend by 15, 20%, what would that be worth? I'm going to bet it's worth a lot more than $1,500 a month. And that's how much it costs to build an employer brand, especially when you treat it as a subscription or employer brand as a service. If you want to learn more about how you can make these kinds of impacts almost immediately, check out employerbrandlabs.com. That's employerbrandlabs.com. All right, let's get back to the podcast. Yeah, and your approach has been very social oriented. Now, look, I've said a lot that, yes, your corporate career site looks boring because 14,000 people had a voice in it, Everybody had an opinion. You made compromise on compromise. It was a nightmare. It was a gestation period. It was an elephantine gestation period. And that is a phrase I don't get to use very often. And it took forever to get put together and get birthed and put out there. And by the time you put it out there, whoever's in charge of the career site goes, never again. Oh my goodness, never anymore. That's horrible. And so it leads to social to be the beating heart of what's really real. What's really going on? What does the company really think about? And you look at, like, most companies have, a huge team that built the career site, but it's some 25-year-old kid building the LinkedIn post every day. It is the recruiter who is out on their own saying whatever they feel like, who is giving you what's really going on. So social is the channel to say, get beyond the gloss, get beyond the corporate speak, the lawyer speak, all the other HR speak, whatever you want to call it, and get into, this is what's really going on. This is what people are thinking about and caring about. So your focus has been on social media, which I applaud. So what about, how do you approach social? How do you think about it? I know that's a big, really broad question, but in terms of, to your point, attracting the people who really should be in the funnel, what is your approach on social? How much does that connect? How much does being on social and speaking that more real drive that kind of funnel?
Yeah, look, I think first thing I think about with social is relatability and like how are you relating to people, and then through relating to people, what are the conversations and connections that you're starting? And I think this is a piece that a lot of people don't actually see, because I think a lot of people will look at my social media and they'll see a lot of reactions, a lot of engagement, but what they don't actually see is years and years of conversations and DMs and connections. And so when I think about social media, I really do focus on the social piece first and then the media second, which is obviously, if you look at my background now and you look at my setup, that's amped up, but that's only within the last year. Before that, everything was actually pretty like bootstrapped and like not really high quality, because I really focused on the social aspect. So what are the conversations I'm starting with my content? Where are those conversations going? Are they going to the DMs? Are they going to like Zoom calls offline? And so I think that relating with people and understanding, like for me, I was recruiting recruiters. So I thought, well, what's the type of content recruiters are going to relate to? Okay, probably funny stuff that sucks in their job. Why? Because I know we all have a sense of humor and we all go through just insane stuff, right? Because we're dealing with people. So if I can put that content out, it's going to really resonate with recruiters that's who I'm looking to recruit. And it's kind of, and that's kind of where the idea with a lot of like the humor-based content came. Now you might look at, I hear from a lot of people who are hiring accountants, for example. They're like, oh, well, that wouldn't resonate with accountants.
Are you
kidding me? I'd argue with it and say
accountants are hilarious. They have to be. That is a boring ass job. They have to be some of the most interesting. Like I found Comp and Ben people who are like, oh, the HR of HR, the most boring of the boring. I'm like, no, those people are really interesting and they have really interesting jobs. We just don't have the line of sight to it.
And I think that's what you have to think about. And like, I will say, I honestly think that humor, it's the best way to connect and relate to anybody. I don't think there's any group of people that doesn't have it. And we're human, right? So we have that reliability. But maybe you don't want to lead with humorous content, all right? So then you've got to figure out what's a way that I'm going to connect with the people that I'm looking to reach. And so then you got to think about what are the things in their jobs that they're going to be interested in, like what's going to make them better at their jobs, what's going to impact their businesses. So for example, every business owner I know, they care about one thing, their business and how their business is doing. So if you can start to create content around emerging technology or news in their industry, how it's going to impact their business, then, you're not going to go viral because, business owners probably aren't spending all day on LinkedIn, but you want to be thoughtful and helpful to them. So there's lots of different angles. There's lots of different ways to approach social media. I think for me, it's always been, how do I relate to people? How do I start conversations? I latched on to humor because I think it's like how I think anyway. And like, I just like to have a laugh. I like to joke around. I like to do all that sort of stuff. So it kind of came naturally. But I also just realized that most recruiters have a sense of humor because you have to have one, because it's like, I can't see you being a recruiter and not having a sense of humor when just like, someone goes through a long process, and then the CEO just randomly decides to turn it off, right? Or says, hey, we're going a different direction. Yeah. So like thinking about the social part over the media part, I think is crucial. And I think what actually happens is most people they kind of forget about the social part,
Mm.
and they're so focused on the media part, right? And it's like, look, I think with social media, what I've seen, and it's whether it's with podcasts, whether it's with just social media posts, there's been an emergence of just authentic content. Like authentic content that's not high polished is starting to win. Because to your point, you said it before, like candidates are starting to see through this stuff. But it's like as a society, like
Yep.
we know when someone's using the Instagram filter. We're like filtered out, right? And definitely this generation coming in, when you look at the videos that do well on TikTok, when you look at a lot of the videos, like, yes, there are some really highly produced stuff that does well because it's funny and it's done well. But there's also like this rise of just like selfie videos, authentic. And so again, going back to like, what are people relating to? How are you getting social with that community? I think is just a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And the social channels are all, they feed you metrics for the wrong thing. Because maybe for some other people, they're the right thing, but for us, it's the wrong thing. I would rather have 100 Nobel Prize laureates think I'm funny and interesting than have a million strangers think I'm funny and interesting. And that to the metric seems stupid, but when I say it like that, everybody's like, yeah, of course you want 100 Nobel laureates to think you're smart and funny. They're the smartest people. They're the most valuable people. And the metrics say more is always better. It's always how many more clicks, how many more visits, how many more followers, how many more whatever. And in the end, let's be fair, most of those people aren't even real people. They're bots or they're, click farms or whatever. If you start with the media, the metric is more. And to your point, if you start with a social, it's about who. And that's a very different conversation.
Look, and look, I've been doing this for 4 years, like religiously, right? Like every day, multiple times a day. I didn't get to 30,000 followers for like 2 years. And I think like, then I got to, once I got to 100,000 followers, way easy to get to 200,000. And like, it seems like big numbers, but it took me like 3 years to get to 100,000 followers. Now I see people popping up on LinkedIn are like, in 6 months I got to 100,000 followers. And I'm like, great, your 100,000 followers are just, like you said, they're bots. So they're using AI just to comment all over the place. And I'm like, guys, it's the same thing with like recruitment strategy, right? Like, it's right now, it is so easy to do outreach. Like I've got a tool that I use, and I can send out sequences like that. Like it does most of the sourcing for me, or a good bulk of it, once I've done the initial sourcing. And then I add people into the funnel. I'm just going through, yes, I like this. No, I don't like that, blah, blah. And I've got an idea of who I'm looking for. And then I add them into a sequence, and it's literally sending out 3 messages over 15 days. It's amazing. I love it. But the problem is with that is everybody's doing it. So it's getting louder. And now the same thing's even happened on social media where I got approached by a guy and he said, I want you to get behind my brand. I'm coming up with this new AI technology. And what it does is you can actually just press a button and it will come up with a comment. It will read the post and it will come up with a comment. And I just said, look, dude, I don't know if you have looked at any of my content or ever listened to anything I've said. I don't think you have, because I hate that stuff. Like there's nothing more than I hate, because again, I started off with the social.
What part of realist real does that speak to?
That's why I said, how can I be the realest recruiter? And like, and I said, I think it's a great idea because I think people will be interested in it. But I think it's a terrible idea at the same time.
Yeah.
So like, I think you've got a product that's going to make a lot of money, and I'm happy for you with that because I know there's a lot of really lazy people with it.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, I know it's not going to help produce what you think it's going to produce. And what is going to end up happening? One of my friends said, "What happens when you don't read the post and James goes, yeah, this week was the worst week of my life. I lost 3 family members in this." And it was super terrible. And then you click the button and it just says like, James, condolences, getting through a terrible time. And it just seems like you just lost credibility in one thing. And I think I made a post about it on Twitter, and then someone's like, oh, I completely disagree. Like this is gonna, automation really helps. And I'm like, yeah, like I get that. But again, you're starting from this piece where like, media, you're so focused on your media and the content and the comments, and you read the playbook about commenting on 100 people's things. You missed like the social.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
if your content is not leading to more conversations with people you want to have conversations with, you failed
Yeah.
miserably,
Yeah.
right?
The
And
biggest challenge with AI is that it makes it so easy, and and when you get to reality, when things get easier, more people use it and it becomes less effective. And in fact, the harder something is to do, the more valuable it is to do, simply because fewer people are doing it. And I think that is where the AI reshuffle is really having a weird conversation. It's really going to shift how we see recruiters. And it is going to force us to say, how do we be more real? How do we be more quality focused? How do we be more social focused instead of more volume, media, size, ease, optimization focused?
I look, I think there's going to be I'm already actually seeing it because I'm pretty, I won't say I'm like involved in the community, but I have a lot of friends who are in like the
Yeah.
sales community, right? They're like sales influencers and like tech
Mm-hmm.
influencers, and they're just people I
Mm-hmm.
know from LinkedIn from being on the platform. But what I'm seeing in that space, and I think a lot of times they kind of like lead the way in like these new kind of fads, is like these like micro events and like just micro pop-up events where it's like, hey,
Yep.
I'm in San Francisco, let's get like a little 10 to 12 people gathering. And I think what we're realizing and what we're kind of coming to is the digital is important, I think, for just awareness and nurturing, but it's nurturing relationships. And I think, again, this is the piece, like you can't nurture something that's not been established. And like I've seen this, like people will be like, "Oh my god, like dude, you have 200,000 followers. Like everything in life has to be easy for you. Like you must just walk into like a sales conversation, everything's sold." And it's like, kind of. But if you think about, yeah, there are people in there who've been following me for 4 years.
Yeah.
But then there's 100,000 people who've only followed me for 6 months to a year, and they don't really know me. They haven't seen too much of my content,
Yeah.
and so
They think you're funny, not necessarily interesting, not necessarily smart, not necessarily skilled in what you do. They've seen the icing on the cake. They've not seen what the rest of it is.
yeah, and it's like there's not a relationship there. And again,
Yeah.
it's like this is where my idea of like future BD, future recruitment, future just business is I think you've got to have like a multi-pronged approach where you're meeting people in real life. So like me
Yeah.
and James, we meet at RecFest, right? We meet face to face, we get to know each other, we have a conversation. And then my content is just hitting him like throughout the year. So he's
way
like,
more powerfully because we've met in person.
because we met in person, because he knows me, and that's where it's like nurturing. But I think
Yeah.
a lot of people they jump to the nurturing. It's like, we're nurturing. What are you nurturing? If
Yeah.
there's no social actual connection there, then it's nothing. So you've got to like make that connection either in person, offline, in a community, and then you use the content just to stay top of mind and awareness. So then in a year, he's like, oh man, so you had another baby, or I saw this happen, or so you launched this part of the business, and you're like, yeah, that's the nurturing power.
Yeah.
And I think, and then the second side of it is, I just think like people are going to start tuning out to like all these things, and they're just going to want more human connection. So I actually think like there's still a ton of value in it, and I don't want to, obviously social media I'm really passionate about, and I think there's a lot of value in it, but I think there's going to be more of a just people wanting more human connection. Like I think we just lost human connection all the last 3 years, and it's getting to a point now where I think people are just like we got to meet in person. And for recruiters, what does that look like? Well, it means you want to get some good candidates. Maybe it's going to the local tech meetup.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to the local, chamber of commerce meeting and just meeting people. And then really learning how to strategically nurture with social media and with your employer branding and things like that.
Yeah. So my question then is, thinking broadly, I mean, obviously on the micro level, I think I have a sense of what the answer is, but on the macro level, does it make sense for recruiters to try and be famous? In a lot of ways, we're an industry of facilitators. We're the quiet middlemen or middlewomen who kind of connect dots and bring talent to the hiring managers and make that happen. And we're not very vocal. We're not very out there. We don't have a lot of face time in the world, right? There's not, if I asked you who's the most famous recruiter, only a recruiter would answer that question. Everybody else would be like, wait, those are people? Aren't they just bots? Is it necessary or is it valuable for recruiters to say, part of my job is to be a little famous?
I think it's just being known. I think being known in your industry is a helpful thing. But I'd say I think if you're internal, you want your company to be known in the marketplace,
Mhm.
right? If you're agency, that's where I think you want to be known in a marketplace, because they're
Yeah.
two different games. Like in agency, you're typically full desk, or you're on sales, or you're in recruiting, and the more people that know you, like if let's say I'm in tech, and everybody knows me as the tech recruiter to go to,
Yeah.
my job is going to be easier. With that being said, though, if I'm internal and everybody knows me, but they don't know my company, I don't think it's powerful. So I think for internal recruiters, it's working your team and your company.
Mm.
You want them to be known in the industry as a go-to, and that's where it's like working with employer branding, it's working with marketing, and it's understanding like we're all on the same team here. Like, look, if your company is doing poorly with sales, you're out of a job, because if sales aren't coming in, you're not going to be doing hiring, which means you're
Yep.
going to be out of a job.
Yeah.
And so when you're internal at a company, I think you got to think more business minded and go, look, my content is not just about attracting candidates. It's about having the brand elevated, so we're the go-to for when people want to come work. But also, like I can actually start to share content that will generate sales and more brand awareness. So I think the recruiter of the future is just understanding, like, how am I adding value to the business as a whole.
You said the magic word, business. That's the
A,
key.
that is the key. And the agency, again, it's like I think it's helpful to be known in your industry. A great example of this, like Joe Mullings. I don't know if you know Joe, but Joe is to me, he's like the guy when it comes to agency recruiting, because he's got a big agency, he's making a lot of money, he still runs a full desk, he's creating content for his clients, he's got a studio. It's like he's a guy that people in his industry want to work with,
Mm-hmm.
because he's got like that gravitas, right? But he's been doing it for 6, 7, 8, 9 years. So people, like, they want to work with him, they want to know him. Lou Adler's another guy. Lou Adler's built a brand where, companies want to train up their people with Lou's methodology. They want to, and he's got a great training business, but he's also getting recruiting openings as well because of that.
Yeah.
So I think agency fame and like just being known is probably more of a big thing, and then internal, again, adding that value to the business and getting the business known is a bigger deal.
I throw out Amy Miller. Obviously, she's in-house at AWS. I think she does such a great job being Amy, but also being the face of AWS to a certain audience. And I think that's a tightrope to walk, to say, how do I stroke the ego and be famous and be known for this thing? Because one day she's going to look for a job, and one day she's going to want a different job. And so she needs to be known. But at the same time, she's really serving this other master of AWS to say, how do I bring in better talent? How do I make them more excited about what we're doing? And that is an interesting game. You mentioned people who are doing it on their own and agency side, which that's a little more laser focused. If you're in-house, it's very rare to see someone who's really good at that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of people. There's someone, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she's actually bigger on TikTok, and she works for Intuit. But she's got a huge following on TikTok, and one of the things that she says all the time is like, people will have seen her content on TikTok, and it was like one of the things that got them interested into it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's like my whole thing now is like, after seeing what's happened in 2022 and 2023 with recruiters, which is like a lot of layoffs,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of comes back to that original thing we were talking about, where if people just think recruiters on the job seeker side are there to help them find a job, and then from the internal side, they just think we're posting jobs and people are just applying and all we're doing is sifting through, they're missing. You're actually missing on both sides, like the real value of what recruiters are really supposed to do. And I think that's because we are kind of invisible. But you have, like, people don't know the value that you bring to a company, you're going to be dispensable, right? Because as soon as they think that what oh, we don't have any hiring to do, all right, we'll get rid of the recruiting team. We feel like we can't get rid of the recruiting team. They're our voice on social media. They're generating leads for us. They're doing all this amazing other stuff that's part of their job, but they're bringing value in different ways. That's where it becomes harder to just cut the cord. But if people literally just think this is why people think we're going to get replaced by AI, because they literally think that all we're doing is posting a job to Indeed and ZipRecruiter, and then we're just like looking at who the best people are that applied, and we're having conversations. Some recruiters are probably doing that to a certain degree, but even then, that screening call the consulting with the hiring managers. There's so much more that we do, but people don't know that because we never talk about it. So I'm big on like using content, not just for candidates, but using content to build credibility within your own organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? The hiring manager goes, wow, you're that recruiter. Like I see your stuff on social media all the time, and you're sharing like really valuable information here. They're going to listen then when you consult them on what's going in the marketplace because they're viewing you as a subject matter expert. I wonder how many recruiters, have that problem where hiring managers don't respect them.
The order taker mentality.
Yeah, you don't know. What do you know about engineering? You never engineered anything in your life. But they start seeing you as the person who knows about the industry and you're on top of the news and you're adding your thoughts. 100%. That's how you become a subject matter expert. And then they go, yeah, actually, you know more about what's going on in the market than me because I see you talking about it all the time.
The point or the purpose of employer brand is to help people choose your company as a place to work over other companies. Now, put that way, suddenly employer brand doesn't seem so complicated. It doesn't seem so crazy. And it seems like something your company could take advantage of. And it is. Take a look at employerbrand.ing, employerbrand.ing, or employer branding, and you can find hundreds of resources, either free or dirt cheap, to help you understand what employer brand really is, how it really works, how to measure it, how to value it, how to talk about it, how to sell it to your boss. So check out employerbrand.ing for all sorts of employer brand resources to help you take advantage of your company's employer brand.
Exactly. That's the thing. I think recruiters should embrace this consultant methodology, this consultant perspective, that you're not there to take orders. And I know if you put 4 recruiters in a room and give them a drink of some sort, that's the complaint they have. It's, they just see us as order takers. It's because you're not being seen as consultants, because you're not bringing in your perspective, your expertise of the market. Yes, your hiring manager knows how to correlate fraction, blah, 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 blah. And don't ask me, I'm not technical. I can barely spell DNA. But you know that it turns out right now that the real super hot companies are this, and the ones are having problems are this, and that you know how to grab them and you know how to engage them and you know what's happening and you know what people are looking for, or the big perk is bring your dog to work or whatever. You have a frame of reference and a point of view. And recruiters have been told over and over and over again, you are just an order taker. You are just a facilitator. You are just a conduit for information from the hiring manager out to the job posting. And that is what's one of the things that is killing recruiting.
Look, and and I've seen this more, even just with some like on my live show, for example, just conversations that I'm having with people where I'm going, well, what do you think about AI? Like, what are the new tools out there? And they're like, I haven't had time to look. And I'm like, guys, like, I honestly think that part of being a consultant is, this is the same. Honestly, it's the same for marketing. It's the same for HR. It's the same for accounting. It's the same for all business units. Like every business unit, I think, needs to have an idea of where they fit into the business and what's going on with the business. And I think it's having that like entrepreneur, what do they call it, intrapreneur mindset. Like, and I think with recruiters, like if you can become that person who is looking at, well, not as only just how is AI going to impact my job, but how is AI going to impact our industry? What are the big mergers and acquisitions that are going on? What are the news sources saying that's going on in our industry? If you become that person that's on top of that, it's like you then become a thought leader because they know that you know more. And again, the easy way to do this, share content that's already been created, share news articles, put your point of view on it.
Yep.
And I think, how is it going to impact the business? How is it going to impact your candidates? And so again, I think it's for recruiters, it's dual-sided. Like agency recruiters, it's more about putting content out there to generate sales and generate candidate leads. So it's kind of that. Those are the two sides.
It's a two-sided market. Yeah.
Sales, you're adding credibility to your potential clients. You want to be known as a thought leader in your space, somebody that knows what's going on and is going to be valuable and help them with their needs. Internal, the dual-sided is your own business. And so if you're struggling to get time with hiring managers, start putting some videos out there because video is extremely powerful. And they 5 minutes of you each week for a year that hiring manager will feel like they know you, and then when you sit down with them on that intake call, they'll feel like they're on a call with like a celebrity or something, and and then when you make the suggestion and go, yeah, you know what, I did the search, or I've been doing research on where salaries are with this position. They're about 20K off. Instead of them going, well, whatever, we'll find someone, they'll go, oh yeah, you know what, you're right with that. We'll figure out what we can do, right? And then what you create is like leverage in the job search to help you, and it's that credibility. And so I think of candidates and your own business, right? And as a recruiting team, if you guys are working together on this, you know, that's how you add value to the business. I don't know how more to say that, but I think if you're only adding value through recruiting, you got a problem.
Yeah, you're only doing half the puzzle. So should companies be actively investing in recruiters' social presence? And I bring this up because a friend of ours, a mutual friend, Liam Darmody, posted something on LinkedIn about how he found a company that was literally incentivizing people to post. And if their post hit 5K, they'd get $50, right? If they hit enough volume of impressions, and really it changes the formula of how a company is known, what it's known for, how many people are talking about it. What's your perspective? I mean, how should companies maybe centralized, maybe not centralized, but really should they be incentivizing on some form recruiting and advocacy like that?
Look, you get the behavior that you reward, right? So I think incentivizing it makes sense. I will share Hirewell, the last company I was with in Chicago. If you follow anybody from Hirewell, great content, a lot of content creators. I think they got like 6 podcasts running right now with different members of the team. Why do they do that? Well, I think the year that I was there, granted, was 2021, but we were able to attribute $4 million worth of business revenue, which was 20% of overall revenue, to content. There's probably more than that, but when we just ask people, like, where did you hear about us? LinkedIn. Okay, great. We know the social content's working. But the way that they would do it was you'd have different tiers. So it wasn't really actually about how many people you reach. Like, I think that's a little bit tight, and I think you're probably incentivizing the wrong things. But it was like, how many posts are you doing? Are you doing a post a week, 2 posts a week, 3 posts a week? Are you running a podcast? So those different tiers, and it wasn't enough to survive on. Like, no one's quitting, except for me. No one's quitting to do content full time. But the thing is it's enough to reinforce, like, hey, we actually care about this, and we value the time that it's taking for you to put into it. So I think what Liam shared with like the 5K reach to 10K, I think you're probably incentivizing the wrong thing, because you're going to start to then see people maybe put out content that's just more clickbaity. But I think incentivizing it some way, why not? Other things I think we should incentivize, candidate experience. I just talked to a company yesterday. They do surveys for every candidate throughout the process, except for maybe people who just get like rejected through that first stage. But anyone who goes through the process and talks to anybody at the company, they get a survey. Now, they didn't incentivize that, but they're monitoring it. But I think, look, guys, you want your recruiters to share content. You want your recruiters to treat candidates better. You want things, you've got to incentivize it instead of just incentivizing how many placements you're getting or these types of things. Because if you don't, then that's all, even internal recruiters, they get bonused on how many placements they're getting. What's that time to fill? No wonder candidate experience is out the window. Because you're telling them by not incentivizing it and not having it part of a KPI, you're literally saying we do not care if you ghost that person. And it's the same with content. What you reward
is who you are.
Exactly. So I'm big on that. And I also think another big thing to do is you got to talk about this stuff. Like, I wonder how many teams are getting together regularly and just talking about, this is the content we're going to put out. This is what we're going to put out. And if you're not talking about it, but you're just asking recruiters, like, hey, share this, share that. Again, you got to create that vision for it and go, hey, this is why we're doing it. We're working together on this and having that teamwork approach.
And and recruiters are to my mind, and I am on the outside looking in, no question, I've never recruited directly, but recruiters are the most individualistic. They're the most, like, they are cowboys and cowgirls. They're out in the lone prairie. They're doing their thing. They don't like to be centralized. They don't like to be corralled. They don't like a lot of structure and rules. They like to just say, look, you're putting me in this place. You should be giving me the autonomy to go do the things I want to do. So questions like, hey, let's come together and talk about what content we should be building. It's a tough conversation, right? They're not inherently we people. They're very much I people, because that's how they're measured. That's the metrics. That's their bonus. That's all that stuff is very individual.
Yeah. And look, I mean, this is, again, Hirewell, the agency I was with. I mean, we'd have a content meeting, and I think the way that it helped was it was optional. We're not forcing it. And then we had probably 20 to 30 people that showed up every week. And then you get random people pop in. But people knew, like, hey, if I want to start creating content, great, we can have this conversation. You can ask questions. Well, what about this piece of content? What about that piece of content? So I think but to your point, the person who needs to facilitate this, it's the leader, right? It's the VP of TA, the director of talent. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really see that many leaders in TA stepping out with this stuff. I've started to see more individual recruiters. And I made a post about this recently. I don't know why recruiters are creating content for other recruiters. I know why I was creating content for other recruiters, because I was recruiting recruiters.
Yeah.
But if you're not a rec to rec, or you're not just recruiting HR and TA people, why is your content so geared towards other recruiters?
Because it's geared towards a different incentive. They're just venting. They're just complaining. They're just trying to be what they're doing. They don't have a goal in mind.
I think that's it. And I think also it's like, look, if you create content for recruiters, you're probably going to get more reactions than if you create content for people. But again, it goes back to, what is the point of all of this? The point of it is social, right? How many conversations? Great, you got 20 DMs from recruiters going, hey, I really relate to your content. If you don't have any recruiter openings, it's useless. Yeah. I'd rather get 10 likes on social media with 3 DMs from people I actually want to talk to than get 1,000 reactions and 100 messages from people who I got nothing for them.
Yeah.
So I think if you're an internal recruiter, you're listening to this, your agency, and you're in an industry, you think again, what do people in my industry, what are the people that I'm trying to recruit, what do they care about?
Yes.
And I applaud the recruiters who are putting themselves out there. I'm just also wondering, like, okay, just the goal isn't to be known. Well, maybe the goal is to be known by all the recruiters. I shouldn't judge it too much.
I don't know. I'm sure there's a business model where that makes sense. If I gave you a magic wand, what's one thing you would change about recruiting and hiring?
That's a good question. Look, I think it would be the mindset. I think the biggest challenge for me, even with what I'm selling, right? Part of what I'm selling is coaching and coaching around content. And it's so often, what's the ROI? Does this even work? Does this? Or, now I'm seeing it with AI where it's just like this reluctancy to look at new things. I just think
they're throwing up obstacles. They're throwing up challenges so they don't have to change.
And that's it. And it's just like, I wish we had more of that mindset of even just sales and marketing, where it's just, hey, there's this new thing, let's embrace it and let's try and figure out how it makes us better.
Yeah.
I think there's for whatever reason, there's just there can be a lot of fear around change. On the agency side, it's fear. Good example of this. Anytime I talk to agencies about creating content, and I talk about talking about your open jobs or your wins, right? I talk about this a lot. You got to talk about your successes. First thing they say is, well, if everybody knows who our clients are, they're going to go after them. I'm just they're already going after them. Why do you think that it's a secret? If they posted a job on Indeed, they're having recruiters reach out to them.
Yeah.
You've got to trust your relationship with them, that if somebody was to reach out to them and go, hey, I saw you're working with X, Y, and Z, that your client would go, yeah, I'm working with them because I like him. I'm not interested. But that's an example of just it's fear and I saw another comment in a Facebook group recently where this guy was just yeah, we outlived the job boards, we outlived LinkedIn, social media, we outlived, like, I'm not afraid of AI. And I'm like, that's the mindset you got? Like,
Yeah.
the mindset should be like, this is amazing. Like, I just got way more productive, and my life got easier because I actually embraced these things instead of just like saying, oh, it's not, in 1990 we did it this way, and we're going to continue doing it this way until we die.
Exactly.
So just it's that mindset. I think I would love to see that change. And I will say, I think we've been seeing more of that, and I am seeing more people like embrace things. But sometimes it's just these legacy mindsets, and I would love to just change that.
Yeah. So before we kind of close this up, my last question is to you: is there a challenge that you would like to give everybody who listens? Remember, we're talking about people who have realized that something is broken, that something's not working. If having done it this way for as long as we have, if it really worked, we'd be happier. We'd be having more fun. We'd be more productive. We'd be complaining less. What is a challenge you can give an audience who is desperately looking for change?
Look, first of all, look at what you're doing right now within the business. So if you're agency, it's probably pretty straightforward. Maybe it's something within the sales process you can change or modernize or bring in. Obviously, I'm biased towards social media, so that's the example I'm going to use. So maybe if you're agency recruiter, how can I commit myself to post more regularly just to see what happens, so you can experience what the ROI is. I think if you're internal, it's the similar thing. Look at your processes and just look like, how can I bring in, maybe an AI tool, right, that can help save time and like be research, you could do research on. And when it comes to content, how can I just start to, again, be consistent with doing this and just give it a chance? Like, my challenge to anybody is just share content and create content for 6 months and then DM me and say, you were completely wrong, this was a waste of time. Yeah. And if you show me then you created 6 months and nothing good happens, I'll say, I was wrong about the whole thing. You're right. Go back into the shadows, do your thing. But that's my challenge for anyone. Like, just in 2024, take on it, just something new that you can add, right? And look where that gap is in the business and how you can fill it.
Totally. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Joel Lalgee, the Realest Recruiter. Joel, where is the best place people can seek out your work, what you do? Is it just TikTok, or is there good places they should be looking to see your stuff?
I just go to therealestrecruiter.com. That's the website. Got all my socials on there. Got my podcast, got my newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter on that. Go to the website, and then it's got my recruitment offerings, my training offerings, speaker offerings. It's all there.
It's all there. Love it.
I don't have a book, though. I need to get a book. That's what I need to. James, me and you, we'll do a book.
Well, yeah, that's it. Honestly, I think I'm done writing my own books. I think I need a partner in that. But let's be fair. Every time I write a book, I go, that's it, I'm done. And then 6 months later, I'm like, I wonder what my next book will be, because I'm a moron. And that's the answer to that.
I need to get a book. I don't know what it would be. It'd be just a blank book that people can write their own stories in. Mike Winnett style. All right.
Love it. Joel, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Talk to you later. Everybody, thanks so much for being here, and see you next week.